And taking the number 6 spot, we have a level 7. While not as amazing when taking into account generic cards, there have been some absolutely bonkers level 7 archetypes. When discussing generic cards, Synchro monsters immediately take the spotlight, with Ancient Fairy Dragon, Dark Strike Fighter, Black Rose Dragon, and Yazi Evil the Yangxing all being generic level 7 synchros. All 4 of these cards have either been staples in meta decks, like Yazi through Sword Soul's lifespan, enabled crazy combos like Ancient Fairy Dragon and Dark Strike Fighter, or have just been overwhelmingly strong like Black Rose Dragon. As for generic main deck cards, there's some that really shine. Cards like Fantastical Dragon Phantasme or Chaos Hunter have seen widespread play in very many formats as apt counters to certain dominant decks. And who could forget Gore's Emissary of Darkness? It's one of the most important cards of Edison format and one that terrorized attacking players for years to come, making players always attack with monsters with less attack first. But the elephant in the room is pretty obvious. The Dragon Rulers, the deck that heralded the biggest changes the game would ever see, and the measuring stick players use to evaluate card power for the next decade. While not as strong nowadays, Redox, Tempest, Blaster, and Tidal made for an engine never seen before that could access some of the strongest extra deck monsters that existed at the time, like number 11 Big Eye and Mecha Phantom Beast Dracossack. All of this coupled with the insane acceleration of Sacred Sword of 7 Stars, which is also level 7 card support. And even before the Dragon Rulers, level 7s were already heralding the strongest decks of their eras, with Machina Fortress and, more importantly, Dark Arm Dragon. Dad brought forth a now infamous format where players had to spend more money than ever in order to compete, with the decks easily breaking the 4-digit mark. But after Dragon Rulers, it would be a good 7 years or so before Konami would give level 7 another shot with a good archetype. In the meantime, we got some admittedly very strong cards, like Absol Dragon, Distrital Lost Dragon's Frozen, and Donna Wrestler Pancrotops. But it would be in the same set that made level 6s relevant with the release of Bystials, where Konami would remind people of the strength of level 7s. The first wave of Kashtira monsters were seen more as a few generic cards rather than a proper deck. Kashtira Ogre, Kashtira Unicorn, and Kashtira Fenrir were the only main deck monsters available, with Kashtira Shangri-La being the only extra deck card the archetype could call its own. While the deck struggled to perform, Fenrir was seen as the latest iteration of Pancrotops 2, but didn't really have the expected impact on release. Its second wave, however, well, let's just say there's a reason they banned Kashtira Riseheart. This second wave of support made Kashtira the deck to beat, being able to completely lock out an opponent's board using number 89, Diabolus the Mind Hacker, in tandem with Kashtira Shangri-La. This deck made players shiver at the thought of the impending number 11 Big Eye for the first time in 7 years, also forcing them to play 2 copies of the most important extra deck cards they played for fear of losing them to Diabolus and Unicorn. Nowadays, Kashtira remains a rogue deck that comes in and out of relevance thanks to Dimension Shifter, but is very far from what it once was, even if they do still see play as an engine in Fire Link decks. We've still yet to see another level 7 deck since, but level 7s remain relevant in the form of Diabellstar the Black Witch, an obvious include in the Snake Eyes deck, and the face of the latest storyline. But yeah, both Kashtira and Dragon Rulers carry level 7s into a very respectable number 6 place, well above some of its competitors. And entering the top 5, we have our first look at the levels that does not require tributes, level 2. Now, level 2 is a bit of an odd one we're going to take a different approach with. For this level specifically, we'll be looking at its evolution through time, since it's a lot more relevant than for other levels. Very early on, there were a couple of standouts amongst the rabble of cards, like Bite Shoes. Cards such as Apprentice Magician, A Cat of Ill Omen, Cyberstein, DD Scout Plane, Gildagra, Mask of Darkness, Morphing Jar, Old Vindictive Magician, Volcanic Scattershot, Yatagarasu, and of course the all-powerful Time Wizard. While these cards were all fairly relevant and strong for a good chunk of their respective eras, it would be the advent of Synchro monsters which would make level 2s a much more relevant level to be. Mind you, not for the level 2 Synchros themselves, unless you really wanted to summon Paralis the Purple Pyrotile, but for the tuners. Turns out being level 2 is really good if you're going to be used for a Synchro summon, since you get access to a lot of crazy stuff. If you're Earth, you get access to Naturia Beast, and you can use a level 2 tuner with a level 4, the most common level, to access stuff like Goyo Guardian or Bryonic Dragon of the Ice Barrier. And thus, we saw the release of cards like Deep Sea Diva, Blackwing Blizzard the Far North, Fluor Synchron, Fable Raven, Plague Spider Zombie, the Agent of Mystery Earth, and of course, Crepons. It was also during the Synchro era when we were introduced to probably the strongest level 2 monster of all time, if not the strongest card of all time, Maxi. I could sit here and explain why drawing a card every time your opponent special summons is completely insane, but there's been more than enough discussion around this card already, so let's just move on. Around this time, we also saw the release of a small archetype of cards which would overtake the format and would become even more relevant later on, the Frogs. Swap Frog, Dupe Frog, and Ronin Totem made for a killer trio in tandem with Substitute, making for the only FTK deck to ever win the World Championship. But these slimy friends would remain relevant for many years to come, as we'll soon see. Entering the XYZ era, we were given a bunch of misses, since early XYZ monsters left much to be desired. When the standout card of this period is Gachi Gachi Gentensu, you know something's gone wrong. But around this time, we also got the small but very beloved Baby Raccoon archetype, which sought to summon the actual best rank 2 of the era, number 64 Ronin Raccoon Sendayu, to some success as a tier 2 deck. But honestly, other than that and Nimble Angler, there weren't many relevant additions to the level 2 pool until pendulums were introduced. And boy, were there relevant additions once they did. Not as pendulums themselves though, there hasn't ever really been a truly good level 2 pendulum monster other than Performapal Odd Eye Synchron. But back on track, with the release of Invasion Vengeance, we got the first level 2 archetype that actually cared about being level 2, Paleozoic. And while yes, 90% of the archetype are trap cards, they summon themselves as level 2 monsters, making them valid for the list. Couple that with Totally Awesome also releasing in this set, and you've got a recipe for success. The Paleozoic Frog deck became an instant success and a fan favorite for a wide variety of builds that it facilitated as well as the strength of its plays. Particularly explosive for a control deck, but we all know what's coming next. The strongest level 2 archetype ever, which made players read the entire level 2 monster pool in order to innovate into their deck building to reach success, that being Sprite. Released in probably the best set of all time, Power of the Elements, the Sprite are a series of monsters that can special themselves from hand if you control a level 2 monster or a rank/link 2 monster depending on which Sprite you're talking about. You could then use those main deck sprites to go into Gigantic Sprite, which allows you to summon out any level 2 monster from your deck, and also locking both players into only summoning level 2s for the rest of the turn. In the OCG, this card be used to summon a Maxi from the deck, then return it to your hand with Swap Frog. This combo made Sprite essentially tier 0 in the OCG for a good while until tier limits started to become relevant. With the banning of Sprite Elf, however, the deck took a very big hit to its ceiling, making it slowly drift away from relevance, and currently being experimented with in tandem with the Fiendsmith engine. Honestly, sprites by themselves could earn level 2s a spot on this list, and the rest of the archetype and generic cards grant them a very solid top 5 spot. And moving on to the number 4 spot, we have the level 8s. In case you haven't noticed, 8 is the level of the boss monster, the level of the big bad monster you usually end on or build your deck around. Be it 2004 or 2024, level 8 monsters are a staple of the game. From Blue Eyes White Dragon to Snake Eyes Flamebird Dragon, level 8s have dominated the game ever since its creation. Chances are, if you've played, well, any deck, you had a big, cool level 8 monster you wanted to bring out at some point. Be it ABC Dragon Buster, Masterpiece the True Draco Slaying King, Chilaments Rukalos, Cosmo Dark Destroyer, Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, or any of the other hundreds of big level 8 monsters, pretty much every deck's endboard features a level 8 monster. Since the beginning of time, level 8 monsters have been the big bads of the game. Can you think of any iconic level 8 monster that starred in the anime? Come on, it's an easy one. It has 3000 attack and 2500 defense, and is used by one of the most important characters in the anime, getting a lot of ways of support and becoming a fan favorite very quickly. Yeah, that's right, we're talking about Blackluster Soldier. Okay, but seriously, Blue Eyes White Dragon set a lot of standards. The peak of attack points in a Neuro monster, as well as a level of the big antagonist monster, a trend that has been followed for most of the game's history. After all, 2 of the most dominant cards of Master Duel era were level 8 monsters, Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, and Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End. Those 2 monsters became emblematic for their age, and set the standard for what a boss monster should be. These 2 monsters had their own summoning conditions and featured extremely powerful effects that disrupted your opponent. This was iterated time and time again, and not just in the main deck. When it comes to the extra deck, 8 used to be the premier level for strong synchro monsters. There's obviously Stardust Dragon, Red Dragon Arcfiend, iconic cards from the anime that also saw a lot of relevant play in the TCG. But looking beyond that, there are just so many extremely good level 8 monsters, from cards that no longer are relevant but dominated in their eras, like Void Ogre Dragon, Thought Ruler Arcfiend, or Baxia, Brightness of the Yang Xing, to cards that got banned for their sheer strength, like Borreload Savage Dragon or Chaos Ruler the Chaotic Magical Dragon. Another part of the extra deck where level 8 shine is with XYZ Monsters. Rank 8 monsters have easily been some of the strongest and most game-defining out of all of the XYZ monsters. The Zombie Vampire, number 22 Zombie Stein, number 68 Sanafon the Sky Prison, number 90 Galaxy Eyes Photon Lord, Divine Dragon Knight Felgran, Erratic Sun Dragon Overlord of Heliopolis, and of course Dingirsu the Orcus of the Evening Star, among many others, have been a menace throughout the years. But you don't even have to go to the extra deck to find a powerful generic level 8 monster that you can slap into almost any deck. The Horus archetype is comprised of 5 level 8s that can special summon 4 of themselves for free and feature amazing defensive effects that also lead you right into a wide variety of rank 8 monsters that populate the extra deck. Something to also keep in mind is that level 8 has somehow been the level of most good Chaos monsters. We've already talked about Blackluster and Chaos Emperor Dragon as well as Chaos Ruler, but there's also Chaos Dragon Legionnaire, the Chaos Creator, and the overwhelmingly game-defining Dark Magician of Chaos. And even if there haven't been any proper level 8 archetypes past Blue Eyes and Horus, there's just too many decks that feature level 8 monsters in their deck list to ignore them. So yeah, for how strong they are overall and how many of them there are, level 8 is number 4 on our list. And for our number 3 spot, we have the lowest level there is, level 1. It's pretty funny how the highest level is amongst the worst and the lowest level is amongst the best, considering higher investment usually means stronger effects, but in Yu-Gi-Oh! It seems to be just the opposite. Early on, level 1 monsters were surprisingly relevant compared to its low-level peers. This is in good part because of Metamorphosis, allowing you to transform any level 1 monster into a Thousand-Eyes Restrict, a real menace at the time. This meant cards like Dark Mimic level 1, Magical Merchant, Magician of Faith, and Sinister Serpent were staples during the GOAT era, in tandem with Scapegoat. But the strongest level 1 monster at the time was no doubt Magical Scientist, for, well, obvious reasons if you read the effect. Summoning any fusion monster for essentially free was a bit overtuned and earned the card a quick ban. Other than that, level 1s were not actually relevant until the introduction of Synchro monsters, and well, that's because there's no better for a level tuner than level 1. The 5Ds eras gave us standouts like Blackwing via the Emblem of Honor, Fishborg Blaster, Dirac Alio, Mindmaster, Spore, and of course Glow-a-Bulb. And these level 1 tuners ruled the meta for a good while. Vayu is obviously the face of the best deck in Edison format, Vayu Blackwings, a strategy that has dominated Edison format ever since its resurgence in 2020. Meanwhile, Fishborg Blaster got the banhammer for facilitating completely ignorant loops that usually ended with an FTK. One of the biggest standout level 1 monsters for the Synchro era, however, is not a tuner. That's Mystic Piper. This unassuming level 1 monster that draws 1 card and can draw another if the card you drew was a level 1 monster, brought forth the oftentimes forgotten Chaos Piper deck, a strategy making use of a wide variety of decent level 1 monsters to turbo through, all of them light and dark, giving you access to powerful finishers like Chaos Sorcerer. This was in good part aided by the existence of Effect Veiler and DD Crow, 2 of the first actually good hand traps, and both of them level 1 monsters. But what really pushed level 1 to the next stage was the release of 1 for 1, a normal spell that effectively makes every level 1 monster a 4 of, being able to summon straight from the main deck. This spell has been an auto-include in every single deck that includes a level 1 monster since its release, and it's clear why that's the case and will continue to be for the foreseeable future. While other level 2s have to dedicate resources to summoning something like Gigantic Sprite, which also locks them out, level 1s just have a normal spell that does the same thing, and it's not even once per turn, which is probably why it's been limited since it's been released. When XYZ Monsters released, rank 1s were amongst the worst you can go into by far. Konami expected you to use 3 monsters to go into something like number 56, Goldrat. I think it was better to just keep them and not go into that. But through the Arc 5 era, we received some upgrades to level 1 pool as a whole, like Absolute King Backjack and Jet Synchron, but we were still missing a dedicated level 1 archetype. We would have to wait all the way until late 2020 to get our first archetype comprised mostly of level 1 monsters, and a meta one at that being Drytron. Drytron was the first relevant ritual deck since Necrons in 2015, and Drytron is an archetype comprised mostly of level 1 machines with 2000 attack, which can ritual summon using their attack points instead of their level. Add to this another insane level 1 monster in Eva, And you've got a recipe for success that involves summoning Herald of Ultimateness with about 6 negates. Another element that greatly aided the deck's success was the vast improvements to the extra deck that it had received when it came to level 1s. Previously, we talked about how the rank 1 pool was probably the worst out of all of the levels during the Zexal era, but that changed significantly in the past few years. Cards like Lureless Assembled Nightingale, Kiki Nagashi Fucho, and the archetypal Drytron Mu Beta Fafnir gave the strategy both engine access, survivability, and easy access to Zeus. Add to that the inadvertently strong Link Rebo, and the rest is history. It would be a good while until we received another relevant level 1 archetype, and it's one players are still having to keep up with in the current format, Snake Eyes. We all know about this crazy deck that's comprised of mostly level 1 monsters, and that somehow always has a follow-up. Still, most of the deck's unfairness comes from Snake Eyes Flameberg Dragon, so we cannot count this one as 100% a level 1 deck, even if Snake Eyes Ash and Snake Eyes Poplar do most of the heavy lifting with their insane effects. But it still adds to the overall power level 1s, helping them get to the number 3 spot on this list. And barely missing the level 1 spot is level 3. Level 3s have been some of the most widely played levels for a good while, and most of the heavy lifting is done by exactly one archetype, Burning Abyss. If you have played any Yu-Gi-Oh deck since 2014, chances are you've encountered Dante, Traveler of the Burning Abyss, at least once, in tandem with a deck full of versatile tools. This fan-favorite archetype turned a decade old very recently, and let's just say there's a lot you could achieve in 10 years of Yu-Gi-Oh! For starters, Burning Abyss is a deck with the largest number of tops out of any deck ever. While decks like Zodiac, Spiral, and Snake Eyes were more than dominant during their respective periods in the meta, they still have not accumulated the sheer amount of premier events that BA has throughout its existence. And why is this? Well, there's a myriad of videos and articles dissecting the history of the Burning Abyss archetype, so we'll sum it up in one word: versatility. The deck's toolbox style of card design made for a perfect shell to build around, adapting to whatever the current format required. And this is in part because of the number of tools that synergize with the number 3. One of the most important cards for the level, and even one of the most important cards ever, is Tour Guide from the Underworld. This level 3 fiend brought with it a new age of deck building. Before BA release, Tour Guide was already being played in a wide variety of decks, mostly bringing Sangan out of the deck, or even another copy of herself. And while her restriction meant that you couldn't bring out another card like Bryonic Dragon of the Ice Barrier, it didn't say a word about using her for general card advantage or for a rank 3. And rank 3 monsters were extremely dominant for a good while. Cards like Windups and Mains, Ghost Trick Alucard, Leviair the Sea Dragon, and number 30 Acid Golem of Destruction were present in many players' extra decks for years after the release, and with good reason. Now, is that to say level 3 monsters were irrelevant before the Burning Abyss archetype released? Not at all. Even by the time of GOAT, with its much smaller card pool, there were already extremely strong level 3 monsters. Some of these cards include Jiaojun the Spiritualist, Injection Fairy Lily, King of the Swamp, Cyberjar, Fiberjar, Night Assailant, Sangan, Spirit Reaper, Gillosaurus, Cypher Soldier, and obviously the meta-defining Tainted Wisdom. This trend continued for years to come, with 3 monsters showing up in pretty much every format, with cards like Black Salvo, Brotherhood of the Firefist Spirit, Dandelion, Jin Releaser Rituals, Gen X Ally Birdman, among a long list of super powerful level 3 monsters. However, the card that really pushed level 3s into the forefront of relevant in recent years is no doubt Cherubini, Ebon Angel the Burning Abyss. This Link 2 monsters requires 2 level 3s to be summoned, and can send any level 3 monster from your deck to the graveyard as a cost. The amount of level 3 monsters that are in the game is huge, and the amount of level 3 monsters you want in your grave is, while smaller, still huge. Decks like Phantom Knights began splashing a Burning Abyss engine as a way of accessing their engine through any 2 level 3 monsters, or sending Water Enchanters to the temple to protect their plays. And while this deck dominated the OCG for a good while, it didn't really convert into a relevant strategy in the TCG. But the Cherubini engine more than made a splash in the metagame. Another element of note regarding level 3 monsters is that the Ghost Girl series of hand traps are all level 3 monsters. Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion, and the rest have all been widely played in their respective formats, and quickly became some of the most iconic and well-known cards of the modern era. All in all, 3 is one of the best levels with the most variety of the game, and with some of the strongest level-based tools, like the aforementioned Cherubini. Add to that a long list of iconic cards that has been as impactful as Sangan or Ash Blossom, and you get a level more than deserving the number 2 spot on our list. Now, if you've been keeping count or just have a little bit of game knowledge, you've already known what our number 1 spot is going to be for quite a while. That is, of course, level 4. Yeah, no surprise here. While early Yu-Gi-Oh took a good while to figure a lot of stuff out, the go-to level for most playable main deck monsters very rapidly decided to be level 4. This is clearly visible by just taking a peek at GOAT era decks. They are filled to the brim with level 4 monsters. Cards like Dekoichi, the Battle Enchanted Locomotive, Gravekeeper Spy, Tribe Infecting Virus, Tsukiyomi, Kyo the Ghost Destroyer, DD Warrior Lady, Exiled Force, and obviously Breaker the Magical Warrior are present in a vast majority of decks with good reason. Thing is, 4 just hits a sweet spot in card design. Even prior to GOAT, cards like Mechanical Chaser and Gemini Elf were the best monsters you could be playing. And why level 4 specifically? Well, it's the last level you can normal summon without tributing, meaning their power level is allowed to edge the limit between a starter with no tributes and a payoff with tributes. While levels 1 to 3 usually have to pair their effects with some kind of downside, most commonly their low stats, level 4 monsters have little to no downsides paired with their level. Most powerful level 4s not only feature a great effect, but also at least decent stats. The aforementioned GOAT format level 4s range from 1000 attack in Exiled Force to 1800 attack with Kyo the Ghost Destroyer, and 1900 for Breaker the Magical Warrior, which hasn't destroyed a card yet. Still, Konami has attempted to keep a decent balance of attack power and effects when it comes to level 4 monsters. The first and most significant outlier to this rule is the well-known Elemental Hero Stratos. The main starter for any and all hero strategies for years since its release, its search effect, coupled with its rarely used but still powerful background removal ability, seemed all the much stronger when stapled onto an 1800 attack body. This pairing of a strong body with an even stronger effect made Stratos one of the most impactful cards in the game's history. And it's easy to forget just how relevant attack points can be, even in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, some of the biggest hurdles to overcome when playing against tier limits, particularly in the mirror, were the attack changes caused by both Primeval Planet Pillarino and tier limit Scream. Both of these effectively made the 1500 attack tier limits Rhinoheart into a 2500 attack Menace, but I digress. Unlike some other levels, which pigeonhole themselves into a specific playstyle restriction, level 4s are as varied as the stars in the sky. But the most common effect we see in these monsters is what players have come to refer to as the Stratos. Originating from the aforementioned Elemental Hero Stratos, an extremely large number of decks feature a level 4 monster, which searches an archetypal card when summoned. Trickstar Candina, Ariadna the Labyrinth Servant, the Gadget Monsters, Stellar Knight Deneb, Traptrix Myrmelio, Madolche Mageline, Alistair the Invoker, Aluber the Jester of Despia, Infernity Arcfiend, Machina Gearframe, Manadium Ruimheart, and a long etc. list that fits a description. Just printing a level 4 guy with decent stats that searches a monster and has another effect is a tried and true design. But while the Stratos is what you expect to see from a main deck level 4, that doesn't really apply to the extra deck, where we find a massive variety. While fusion levels don't usually matter, cards like Elder Entity Natis, Elder Entity Norden, Magistus Chorozo, and Madragon of the Swamp are all extremely playable cards that have seen a ton of play, with Norden even being banned. While lower level synchro monsters are very few in quantity, kind of underpowered, and not really that easy to bring out, level 4 synchros have had pretty crazy playability rates compared to how little of them there are. Underworld Fighter, Balmog, the Fabled Unicorn, Crystron Quandrex, Armory Arm, Cupid Pitch, and of course Herald of the Arc Light have all seen relevance in meta decks, to some extent or another. But where the level 4 extra deck pool truly excels is in the XYZ monsters. In the same way how level 4 is the most common level, rank 4 is also the most common rank by a long shot. There's well over twice as many rank 4 monsters as the second place, and that's not because of fodder. Zexal era decks quickly developed what came to be known as the rank 4 toolbox, or rank 4 toolbox, a series of rank 4 XYZ monsters present in most decks and strategies that gave them specific answers to different decks that the deck's engines might not be able to answer by itself. During this time, we see the proliferation of Abyss Dweller, Diamond Direwolf, Evil Storm Excited Knight, Gaga Cowboy, number 101 Silent Honor Arc, number 50 Black Ship of Corn, number 66 Master Key Beetle, and Steel Swarm Roach, among many others. The generic nature of these cards made them being level 4 even more important for decks of the era, and even defined whether a deck was viable or not. Later on in the format, and into the Arc 5 era, we saw the rise of rank 4 monsters that extend a deck's plays. Cards like Lavalval Chain, Brotherhood of the Fire Fist, Tiger King, Daigusto Emerald, and King of the Feral Imps were amongst the first to interact with the main deck in a meaningful way that allowed decks to evolve into more combo-centric strategies. From sending combo pieces with Lavalval Chain and Infernity to recycling your engine several times over with Daigusto Emerald and Zodiac. And Zodiac is really where the power level 4 truly hits its ceiling. Very infamous by now, the Zodiac said, "What if instead of investing resources into a rank 4, you could just summon it on one monster?" The end result was one of the most dominant decks of the game's history, in good part due to the exploits of Zodiac Broad Bolt and Zodiac Trident. Now, this would be more than enough to grant level 4 the number 1 spot on this list, but it still keeps going. If I had a penny for every rank 4 monster that got banned for enabling an unfair floodgate, I'd have 2.5 pennies, which isn't a lot, but wait, half? Yeah, we have to talk about number 16 Shockmaster and number 86 Heroic Champion Rongo Minion, but players sometimes forget that we got Outer Entity Azathoth banned as it was being able to void hand traps during your turn with Outer Entity Narla, hence the 2.5. And when it comes to archetypes, even after the Zodiac's demise on the ban list, we obviously kept getting more very powerful level and rank 4s, with one of them, Ryziel, currently tearing apart the OCG, with TCG players bracing for the revival of Mathmech 2. But yeah, pretty much every meta deck ever has had one or more level 4 monsters in their lines. Starting with the Dragon Ruler format, there's Debris Dragon, Traptrix Myrmilio, Shadow Squamata, Necroz of Unicorn, Performer Pal Pendulum Sorcerer, the ABCs, well, you get the point. And that's pretty much why 4 is and will always be the best level in Yu-Gi-Oh! You just can do anything with it. While other levels have more constricted design space, having to balance their ease of access with their power, level 4 will forever live on the edge, being both easy to access and large enough to guarantee powerful effects. And thus, number 4 is actually number 1 in today's list.